the beginnings of America, people came seeking different things. While mostly seeking religious or political freedom, many often came with the hopes of becoming wealthy or to simply find better opportunities. A large portion of people came on contracts in which they would work under a certain management for a specified amount of time. These people were called indentured servants. After this, they were free to either sign another contract or pursue other paths. Pre-industrial America was categorized by northern and southern colonies, both with very different governments, labor forces, lifestyles, and jobs. One common thread was the idea of mercantilism. Mercantilism is essentially a belief of profitable trading. Colonists would provide raw products to a mother country such as England and would be paid to do so. The pay was not much in comparison to the profit the mother country would attain through the finished products. This process, however, would diminish over time as other countries began to fight over the colonies and as the colonists began to see this system as unfair. Mercantilism was a big contributor to the beginnings of industry in America. In southern colonies, the economy depended heavily on cash crops such as tobacco, indigo, and rice. Because of this, the South's governance composed of a group of wealthy farmers called the planter elite. These farm owners would hire indentured servants and slaves to work while they focused on the business matters. Since the amount of wealthy owners were few, the South grew at a slower rate than the North. In northern colonies, the jobs consisted of one or two workers working in a trade. Examples of these occupations are carpenters, masons, coopers, glassmakers, seamstresses, and more. Unlike the South, the labor force consisted mainly of the townspeople. The townspeople also ran the government of that town, gathering at meeting houses or what are called churches today. Technology was a huge factor in the growth of industry. More and more growing businesses just needed something better to become more successful. One very important invention was that of the steam engine. Invented first by Richard Trevithick and later improved by George Stephenson, this invention allowed man to travel at a speed faster than that of the domesticated horse, which had been used previously for so long. The steam engine was the first step towards an invention that would utterly change man's relationship with time and space. The steam engine propelled countless other industries such as driving bellows and rollers, spinning machines, and weaving machines. Another invention is the telephone. Invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, the telephone made communication between businesses much quicker. So instead of having to rely on postal services, they could use the telephone and get an almost immediate response. This also meant that decisions, such as changing and manufacturing, could be made instantly. As the telephone network grew, businesses could reach new areas. They could now connect with other offices and even customers. Connecting with customers became an essential tool because a business could learn customers' needs and to conduct surveys or to directly sell products. I would say the most important invention that really launched America's industry was the cotton gin. It was invented by Eli Whitney and greatly sped up the process of removing seeds from cotton fiber. It worked by running cotton through a wooden drum embedded with a series of hooks that caught the cotton fibers and dragged them through a mesh. The mesh was too fine to let the seeds through, but the hooks pulled the cotton fibers through with ease. Smaller gins could be cranked by hand, and larger ones could be powered by a horse, and later by a steam engine. Previously, a pound of cotton fiber would be separated from its seeds in one day per one worker. With Whitney's invention, that number jumped to about 50 pounds per 2 or 3 workers. Thanks to Eli Whitney's inventions, factories in the North jumped in production and quality. Because of the high demand for products, small shops were no more, and skilled workers could no longer take pride in their work as they began working in factories. They would have one job on one part of a product, and they would do that repetitively for 12 hours a day in terrible working conditions for about $1.20 a week. These poor working conditions consisted of too hot or too cold working conditions, dusty air, poor lighting, dangerous jobs, and much more. The owners, however, didn't care and treated the workers like machines in their factories. What happens when a machine breaks? You either try to fix it up enough so that it can do its job, or you throw it away and get a new one. A real-life example of this is that of a girl named Alzina Parsons. At 13 years old, she caught her right hand in a spinning machine, badly mangling her fingers. The factory doctor then, without any pain medicine, cut off one of her fingers and sent her back to work. Factory owners would hire basically anyone who was willing to accept these long hours and low wages. A family looking for work would often sign a family contract in which all members would sign, and if one wasn't doing their job up to par or got hurt, all members would be fired. It was also very common for the factory owners to hire immigrants who were just entering the country and needed work. Most of these workers began wanting better conditions, less hours, and higher wages. To do so, they banded together to try to get what they want. The new industrial age and the resulting growth of the U.S. economy in the late 19th and early 20th centuries affected nearly everyone in America. The workplace was changing as machines became common, and the demand for unskilled workers brought new groups into the workforce, including immigrants, women, and children. By 1920, nearly 20% of all manufacturing workers were women, and 13% of all textile workers were younger than 16 years old. The abundance of laborers available for these unskilled factory jobs made individual workers expendable and led to decreased wages. The company could increase prices at the local grocery store and give laborers easy credit, keeping workers in debt and stuck working at the same low-paying job. The crowded, dirty tenements in these towns led to high disease and death rates. Health and safety conditions in the workplace were poor, and workers had limited recourse. Anytime workers would protest the working conditions, corporations would blacklist uncooperative workers and replace them with workers who would often work for lower pay and without any benefits. For example, in the summer of 1892, a Carnegie steel plant in Homestead, Pennsylvania, cut workers' wages. The union immediately called a strike. Andrew Carnegie's partner, Henry Frick, responded by bringing in the Pinkertons, a private police force known for their ability to break up strikes. The Pinkertons killed several strikers and wounded many others in a standoff that lasted some 2 weeks. Then, on July 23rd, an anarchist who had planned it, but the public associated the two. Recognizing that public opinion was turning against strikes, the union called off the strike in November. The Homestead strike was part of an epidemic of steelworkers and miners' strikes that took place as economic depression spread across America. In each case, troops and local militia were called in to suppress the unrest. During the period of old immigration, which started in the 1830s and reached a high point in the 40s, there was a great wave of immigration to America's shores. Immigrants had always come to America for economic opportunity and religious freedom. Two types of factors led to immigration. Push factors are those that compel people to leave their homes, such as famine, war, or persecution. Pull factors are those that draw people to a new place, such as economic opportunity or religious freedom. Many immigrants in the late 19th century had both push and pull factors that helped them decide to leave the familiar for the unknown. Until the 1870s, the majority had been Protestants from northern and western Europe. They came as families to settle in the United States, often on farms with family and friends who had come before. Many had saved money from their journey, had a skill or trade, or were educated. Many German and Irish Catholics had immigrated in the 1840s and 50s, and more Chinese arrived after the Civil War. Some Americans had prejudices against Catholics, benefited from the good reputation of their Protestant countrymen. Although they lacked skills and money, the children of these immigrants were often able to blend into American society. Beginning in the 1870s, Irish and German immigrants were joined by new immigrants from southern and eastern Europe. They arrived in increasing numbers until the outbreak of World War I. In contrast to old immigrants who had come before the Irish and Germans, new immigrants were often unskilled, poor, Catholic, or Jewish, and likely to settle in cities rather than on farms. Many came alone, planning to save money in the United States and return home to live. They came from Italy, Greece, Poland, Hungary, and Russia. After 1900, immigrants from southern and eastern Europe made up more than 70% of all immigrants, up from about 1% at mid-century. Many native-born Americans felt threatened by these newcomers with different cultures and languages. After World War I, all signs pointed to economic growth. Stock prices rose rapidly, and factories produced more and more goods with wages on the rise, and more people could afford to buy them. Much of this explosive growth was sparked by a single business, the automobile industry. Car maker Henry Ford introduced a series of methods and ideas that revolutionized production, wages, and working conditions in daily life. Ford did not originate the idea of mass production, the rapid manufacture of large numbers of identical products. There are some business techniques in the 1920s created an era of prosperity. The assembly line reduced the time it took to manufacture a Model T from more than 12 hours to 90 minutes. The assembly line also allowed Ford to keep dropping to the sale products. Payment plans also allowed buyers to purchase on credit. New consumer products made life easier. Welfare capitalism and wage increase helped workers. Advertising brought products to the masses. The automobile industry changed American business and geography. In 1919, only about 10% of American families owned an automobile. By 1920, 56% did. The boom in the automobile industry stimulated growth in all other industries related to car manufacturing, such as steel, glass, rubber, asphalt, wood, gasoline, insurance, and road construction. Americans started to move to the suburbs since they had their own vehicles. After the 1920s, things started to
In the 1950s, started several changes to the industry known as the Big Business Era. For one, the start of corporations where they took business to the next level by joining several groups of companies to form one big one. But as many companies grew, there was a trust formed. A trust was defined as stock markets combined together by companies and have more stock altogether. There was this time one business that was known to do both horizontal and vertical integration. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company expanded through towns and states. There was a problem with the vertical and horizontal integration as Rockefeller used this method to become a monopoly and outrun other oil businesses. There was a term used by companies that allowed companies to do as they please. Laissez-faire was when the government would leave businesses alone, do as they please. Carnegie Steel Company was known for their steel workers and transportation for materials, but government started creating embargoes and tariffs, which in turn hurt the factories that moved out of America. The factories had many brands were overpriced or banned from selling products in America. They would overtax them as well just to have their produce products in the market. But those laws were broken due to many years of unable to get products out. There were debates, and soon enough they all agreed to have the laissez-faire come back, but they don't have total control of their product's price. George Plunkett was a man who was one of those people that turned the government around. He was a lord to New York City and bought land to sell it even more than what it was originally and got profits off of it. Plunkett was more in charge than the mayor of New York City and had several followers among his group. He used his power to form grafting, in which left the townspeople in poverty. The townspeople did not know until a cartoonist known as Nash made cartoons that started to point the blame circle to Tweed's ring. Soon he was put out of office, and soon the laissez-faire was no longer there. More and more factories moved out of America, where they were able to do as they pleased without many rules to go by. So in turn, made them more profits than what they could have gotten if they stayed in America, without paying the taxes of government control and nature control.